Okay. Welcome everyone. Declare the meeting open. Hopefully it's still 4 o'clock. Looks like it's 4 o'clock. Disclaimer. Agenda briefing sessions are used to inform councillors on the items of business to be presented and discussed at the forthcoming Ordinary Council meeting. These meetings are open to members of the public who may request to present a deputation to Council relating to an item on the agenda. No decisions are made at these meetings, although councillors can request additional information or alternative wording be provided to allow for motions to be prepared for consideration at the forthcoming Ordinary Council meeting. Any statement regarding any planning or development application made during an agenda briefing session is not to be taken as notice of approval. Anyone who has an application lodged with the Shire must obtain and should only rely on written confirmation of the outcome of the application and any conditions attached to the decision made by Council. An audio and visual record will be made by means of live streaming of these proceedings and uploaded to the Shire's YouTube page for viewing. Acknowledgement of country. The Shire of Harvey acknowledges the traditional custodians of the land and their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. And we pay our respects to all members of the Aboriginal communities and to their cultures and to elders both past, present and emerging. Item 2, record of apologies and leave of absence. I have an apology from Councillor Boylan and Councillor Jackson and a leave of absence for Councillor John Bromham. And Councillor Burgoyne's joined us on Zoom. Can you hear us okay, Councillor Burgoyne?
Yeah, I can. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, item 3, declaration of members and officers' personal interest. So we'll go through this one by one. So, Councillor Lovett.
As on the screen, thank you.
Councillor Capogreco.
Yeah, same as on the screen, thank you, Mr. President.
Councillor Beach.
Nothing further to add, thank you.
Councillor Crispin.
Scroll down a little bit, sorry. Good as gold, thank you.
Councillor Coleman.
No, nothing further to add on, I think, thank you.
Councillor Campbell.
All correct, thank you.
Check that first page, Councillor Dickinson.
I believe it's correct.
All good on the second page as well, Councillor Dickinson?
Yes, indeed,
Okay.
thank you.
Councillor Burgoyne.
Yeah, that's all fine. Thank you.
No worries. Yep. Looks pretty good. Thanks, Ray. Okay, item 4, deputations. So we have Ross Underwood for item 5.3.1, development application use not listed on lot 101, Binningup Road, Binningup. Welcome, Ross.
Thank you very much, Shire President. And thank you for receiving me and allowing me to speak. Good afternoon, councillors and people in attendance. So my name is Ross Underwood. I'm a town planner employed at Planning Solutions, and I've been engaged by some of the residents in Binningup who have concerns with what is proposed with Albemarle's workforce accommodation proposal. So I wanted to take the time today to introduce you to what our concerns are and also to listen to what's said today. In general, our concerns are threefold: the context and location of this facility and where it sits in relation to the town site, the general principles around locating workforce accommodation facilities, and consideration of the zone objectives, which is the core reason that Council has been asked to consider this proposal. Starting off with context. This is by no means a small development. Originally canvassed as having 1,000 or potentially more. The proposal that's in with us today is to accommodate 500 workers. That alone is a huge number. It accounts for approximately 39% of the entire bidding up population in the town site, a population of 1,296 people. The scale and density of this development being proposed on rural land on the approach to the town is more appropriately located in an urban area. In May this year, Albemarle told ABC that the lack of accommodation in the short to medium term, due to that, they're looking at their own solution to accommodate future workforce for their construction activities. Now, we're sympathetic to the demand that's caused by a shortage of housing in the area, but this shouldn't be taken as an excuse to inappropriately locate facilities on rural zoned land. Market demand, as we know, rises and falls in cycles. At the end of the last boom cycle in the Pilbara, house prices dropped to about a quarter of their value at the end of the boom period. So we need to be planning for the long term, not for short-term market conditions. The applicant looks to justify this proposal on the basis of it being temporary. But this proposal is anything but. On page 1 of the applicant's report, they say the village will be based on a 10 to 15 year lease and indicates there may be a longer-term use for it. In May this year, Albemarle suggested that that long-term use might be aged care, as an example. This facility certainly hasn't been designed to be temporary. It features a 2-storey dining hall with features similar to a boutique brewery. This is wording used by the applicant. A wellness and recreation centre with timber ceilings and wide doors, a 25-metre lap pool, a multi-purpose sports court. All facilities I would love to have in a community near me. Council should not be supporting urban development on rural land because of it being temporary. There is no shortage of appropriate urban zone land in the area in which a facility like this can be located. The Western Australian Planning Commission's Urban Growth Monitor identified some 3,720 hectares of undeveloped urban zone land in the Shire of Harvey alone. Much of this closer to the lithium facility than in Binningham. There are large urban zone properties available for development in places like Australand, Rowlands, Burracup, Waterloo and Harvey. Planning in these areas is well advanced and has been over the last several decades. Most of these areas having structural plans and various supporting reports in support of them for the orderly and proper development of those areas. Moving to the principles for what we should consider the location of workforce accommodation to be. Now, an accommodation camp might be a necessity on a mine site or in a remote regional area where there is a lack of alternative. It's not the case here. The preference should always be to locate workforce accommodation in a residential style accommodation in communities where there are existing services and facilities and infrastructure available and where workers can contribute to the community and to the local economy. There are issues with camp style worker accommodation. There was a recent parliamentary inquiry, Enough is Enough, exposes some of the issues with sexual harassment in camps. Where there is ample urban zone land in an area, there isn't any justification for proposing a camp style accommodation that may have social issues around it that will be in place for 10 to 15 years, if not longer. Moving to the zone objectives, which is the core issue in front of Council next week. The scheme is clear on what the objectives for the general farming zone are. The policy objectives are: 1, encourage these areas to continue to be used for viable large-scale farming activity. 2. Encourage and promote good farming, animal husbandry and soil conservation. 3. Consider some limited tourist and recreational activity. Clearly the proposal is not consistent with any of these objectives. Clause 4.2.5a of the scheme provides that where the proposed use is not consistent with the objectives and purposes of the zone is not permitted. This is, in my professional opinion, the correct and preferable decision. The officer's report to the council doesn't have an alternate recommendation for the council to consider for the use not being consistent with the zone objectives. In our opinion, is such a motion should be sought from the officers. The reason for this is that the proposal has not been demonstrated to be consistent with the general farming zone objectives, and it is appropriately located in an urban area. Approval to facilities such as this in the general farming zone would set an undesirable precedent for like proposals to occur on other general farming zone properties throughout the Shire. In the meantime, we'll continue looking through the documents and converse further with the officers and with councillors as required. And we look forward to the discussion and ongoing consideration of this. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ross. Okay, item 5 is reports. We have item 5.1.1, Harvey Community Precinct Update for direction. Questions from Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. President. My first question is, what are the indicative costs to upgrade and the ongoing maintenance costs of the classroom building and the infant healthcare building, should we retain them?
Right. So on the upgrade costs, the infant health to upgrade for a non-staff office use, approximately $422,000, and that is assuming there are no issues with the previously installed septic tank. On the classrooms, to upgrade for community use, approximately $335,000. To upgrade as an antechamber for the main meeting room could be up to $385,000, depending on the internal furnishing level required. On maintenance, an annual allowance would need to be set aside in a special reserve for each building as it is currently, and I would say there's a minimum of $40,000 per annum one would need to put aside every year to cater for the big upgrades, which would be guttering or roofing or whatever it is, so that would be a minimum.
Thank you. In option 2, there is a loss of parking facilities and access to the art precinct area, which was identified as being a requirement by the user groups. Is it possible to remove part of the infant healthcare building? My understanding that there's been some building additions to the rear of that building to create some parking and allow for access to that artist precinct.
It certainly is possible. Everything comes at a cost, obviously, but you can remove either part or the whole building. So the whole area was 24 parking bays.
Mm-hmm.
We did have a quick look at it, and it looks like approximately 10 bays at maximum could be gotten in there. We might be able to squeeze 11th one in, but we have had the comment that there's a lot of large vehicles, and so we are cognizant that we need to keep those parking bays wide.
I just have a bit of confusion around the RSL and what their actual requirements are through the consultation process. So, do they want to retain their current building, or are they happy to move in entirety to another facility?
So when I spoke earlier this year to not only the President but the whole meeting held by the RSL, they intimated that their group are prepared to move all of their artefacts, their honour boards, special pictures, etc., to the historic area of the library that would be designed specifically to house all of that. They did also say that they wanted to hold their meetings as close to their honour boards as possible, because they use them to read off and so on. I'm not sure of their processes, but they've assured me they want to have their meetings close to that. And they also say that they did state very clearly that should the need to use the building arise, that they would like to have that option available to them. So in the old days, for example, they used to hold a lot of dances and other events there. They very seldom do that because of the demographic, the current demographic of the members. But that's it, yes.
In option 2, in order to maintain the budget and the increase in the number of the amenities toilets, in option 2, will there be a decrease in the size of the library and the Shire administration area in order to keep it within the budget, and if so, by how much?
Yes, so the areas provided for the various groups, like the CRC, the Shire admin and so on, are all at an optimal size, catering for the present needs with the flexibility to change for future requirements. The library is the only building that has the capacity to be reduced in area, and at this stage, because we're only at schematic stage, this would be adjusted down by approximately 150 square metres, potentially an extra 50 metres on that, but at this stage it's 150 square metres.
And that's so that we stay within
the budget. Yes.
Okay. And my final question that I have at the moment is just confirming that the HDCAC group, artist group, are happy to relocate to the arts precinct should option 1 be approved.
Right, so at the group stakeholder meeting held on the 13th of May, the president of the group, Mrs. Jenny Devereaux, and one of her committee members, Mrs. Marilyn Italiano, confirmed that the committee members had met on the previous day to make a decision on the old St Anne's classrooms as a venue for their activities, or to relocate in the future to the new arts precinct. And although they were saddened by the decision, they did assure the architect and myself and the people in the meeting room that they were prepared to move, because they did see the benefit, first of all for themselves moving into the future, but also because of the layout of, and that was the option 1 layout at that stage, they did see the benefit for the whole community.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Dickinson.
Yes, I'm not sure whether this can be answered or not, but in our planning for the future with the current user groups, are they able to financially sustain themselves? And with the new buildings there'll be new lease agreements, so I'm just wondering what form of lease agreements will be in place and whether they'll be paying a rent higher than they currently do, but also what utility costs would possibly be charged for them as well.
I can't discuss all of the detail on this at this stage. It's very preliminary, very early days, but certainly we don't see the arrangements working for community. You know, the community facilities are there for our community to use, and I don't see that changing, moving on to the future.
Councillor Dickinson.
A follow-up question, if I may. So there won't be the situation that they could say probably that they're happy where they are now because they're happy with their lease agreement and their rent, and it's going to cost them more in the future because it's a new facility and they're going to be, asked to pay higher rent.
I personally don't see that as happening, and I don't think we should, as a shire, do that to our community, because our whole existence is because of the community. However, costs increase, and if there were increases in the past, there would be increases in the normal way. But if it is a salt and pepper rental, I'm sure it would remain like that moving forward into the future.
Councillor Coleman.
I just wanted to check that with the library space being reduced to meet the budget, how does that fit within not demolishing and removing 3 buildings and building a motor court? Wouldn't one offset the other in terms of costs?
Well, it really depends. So when you say, are you talking about demolishing it or upgrading it? What are you talking about?
If we go with option 2, as suggested, and we retain the building, so we're not demolishing that and we're not building a motor court,
Yeah.
does that not offset the cost and keep the library at a bigger space within the budget?
No, because of the first question that Councillor Campbell asked, which is what is the cost to upgrade those buildings, just to maintain them and to have them there permanently, and it's at this stage we're looking at about 800,000, and that then offsets that. So, if you round that up, because there are lots of other fees, furnishings and all the rest of it, we're talking $1 million versus $1 million, so we'd need to cut that back somehow.
Councillor Crispin.
Just a question with the option 2, the internal street. Will there be a cost price based on what the future plannings are for a roof in there? Because it'll be an open roof, but in winter time, when it's raining, it looks like it's got a small heatement, so it's going to have very shallow walkways. So if there's a possibility that we get a cost on what it could cost for a roof during winter kind of thing?
Yes. So during the meetings that we've held with the architect, that point was raised, and the community quite liked the idea of that internal street being roofed, or partially roofed at least, and so that when we go forward into the design development stage, that will be addressed and looked at very carefully, and we will be getting costing for that. And once again, if it looks like it's blowing the budget, we would come back to council, or we would make other adjustments to cater for that cost difference.
Thank you.
Councillor Capricorn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can I just ask, excuse me, with the current buildings that look like they won't be touched, the St Anne's, the RSL and the Infant Centre, if they were to be left as is, have council got plans to do upgrades in those buildings currently as they are?
They have been, there certainly is a maintenance reserve on those buildings, and it takes many years obviously to build up. If you've got a larger project, like for example a re-roofing project, will take a few years to build up to get sufficient finance for that. Yes, so those would come, it would be very similar. But the costs that we're talking about, the immediate upgrade when we're doing the building works, we would address the major issues.
So it's fair to say that we already have a budget to keep maintenance on those buildings as is,
Yeah.
and if the buildings were to be retained and they were not to be touched, then the status quo stays the same. There may not be a reason to spend any money to upgrade those buildings if they're going to be used for their current use. Is that a fair assessment?
No, because a lot of them are lacking in things like insulation, accessibility, so we would need to get them to a high standard in order to make sure that they were to code, that their maintenance was up to speed, so we'd have at least a 5-year buffer before we needed to put more money in before we actually needed to use the maintenance reserves. Quite a number of issues, and also not all of them. The current infant health building, for example, is being used as shire offices. So they wouldn't be shire offices, because the whole idea of the shire operations is to get all the staff together in one building, not to keep it separated as we are right now. So that would be potentially offices that either people could use, or the CRC would let out, or whatever it might be, but it would have another use.
But we're basing that on, we're assuming that that's what's going to happen. So we're
In
building a case.
either option,
So
yes.
is it fair to say that we're building a case that we may be a possibility of $800,000 to be spent on buildings, but we really don't have anything in concrete that they're going to be used for anything at the moment?
So what we did was, when the question arose, and we got our quantity surveyor to look at it, because there have been preliminary investigations in those buildings, and at this stage the whole budget is an estimate, so that's just part of the estimate. As we go through the design development stage, and there'll be a report on that, including all the costs, and it'll be far closer to what it is, and you'll be able to make a call at that stage.
Thank you.
Okay. Questions? Councillor Lovett.
Thank you for that. The difference between the two options that have been discussed and bandied around, it's a strange question, but on comparing the two, how many services are duplicated in option 2? So how many additional kitchens, toilets, with just the seems that's my biggest concern between the two, is there's a lot of duplication. And I was wondering whether we've actually got some numbers on those. I should have sent that through to you earlier, I'm sorry, but just the actual, what are the actual figures for duplication?
Look, off the top of my head, I would say at least 3 sets, but I would need to look into that in more detail. I could probably provide that before the ordinary council meeting next week.
Councillor Lovett.
Sorry, no. And obviously at the moment with budgets and workforce and materials and everything else, with both of these options, is it a possibility that it could be a staged approach?
Absolutely, yeah, and the architect has stated that you can have it in 5 stages or 2 stages, or just a single on rolling stage. So.
Councillor Brisbane.
So sorry, I should have asked this question earlier, but just thought about then, with option 1 compared to option 2, do we have a capacity limit? So like what the potential capacity is of option 1 with the amount of people what could be there compared to option 2? So option 2, say, has the capability to have more services due to the fact that it's got double up of everything, or option 1 has more room or more flow for a higher capacity of future?
I think that we've got one of the best architects in the state, or even the country, to assist us to get both options equally designed, so that they'll be able to maximise our use out of this development.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other further questions, Councillor? Okay, item 5.1.2, Corporate Business Plan 2021 to 2022, Quarterly Report, Quarter 4. Question from Councillor Campbell.
Thanks, Mr. President. Objective 1.1 in the Corporate Business Plan makes reference to meeting with 5/8. So I'm just asking if staff could brief council on the content of these discussions in relation to tourism in the Binningup area.
Thanks, Councillor. I'll defer that one to Simon.
Through Mr. Chair. Look, to be honest, they haven't been that extensive. They've only just recently purchased the site, trying to find out what their assets are that they've actually acquired. We have met, myself and the Manager of Economic Development has met with one of the officers there, and To be fair, we wanted to really sound them out in terms of what their expectations are, in terms of timeframes and their expectations of the site. At this stage, they have confirmed that reopening the golf course is their preferred option. However, it is in a much greater state of disrepair than they first thought. So they're looking at their options and timeframes, and also having a look at their water allocations and assets associated with bringing that up to speed. We've also met with them in regard to securing a water allocation for ourselves, because the community open space is using their infrastructure at the moment. So we have had discussions with them in regard to that, and they are talking to relevant parks and garden staff. As recently as this afternoon, a meeting has been confirmed with 5/8 between myself, Manager of Economic Development, CEO and Show President, in Perth to have a further discussion with a larger number of staff from 5/8, and we believe it may include some of their benevolent partners in that company, and we'll take it from there. But at this stage, nothing has been that detailed, to be honest.
Councillor Campbell? Yep.
Oh, no, my other questions were just typos and just the like, so, and Brett's, you've addressed those, so all good.
I was just making sure you're reading it.
I read it, don't you worry about that.
Any other questions, councillors? I'm glad we got you up to the left end. Brad, thanks. Councillor Cabrera,
I've got one question, if you don't mind, Mr. President. On item 4.1.2.1, complete the Harvey Skate Park consultation and concept design, it says that we're 25 to 50% complete, showing we're a bit behind schedule, but it asks, in the action it says remove the project as completed. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that was one of the typos that Councillor Campbell picked up. So it's good, two of you read it, so that's even better. So that should read as project amended. So in the next corporate business plan, I've amended that entire item to be a bit more inclusive, to be undertake the Harvey Skate Park redevelopment. So that way it encompasses all the stages and the costs. It provides a bit of flexibility in case something needs to be shifted out or moved out. We have that flexibility to do so.
Thank you. And yes, I did read it.
Excellent.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Burgoyne.
Just wondering if that typo list included 2.2.1.5. It reads as the intersection lighting Kelly Road and South Side. I think it should be Kelly Road and Raymond Road, if I remember right. You're not there, Rick, are you?
You're mute, Rick.
Still on mute, Rick.
Yes, yeah. Councillor Burgoyne's right. It should be Kelly Road, South Western Highway.
Kelly Road. Is it Kelly Road and Raymond Road, that line on?
Sorry, what was that?
Kelly Road and Raymond Road, we've got the lights on?
Well, no, it's Raymond Road and further up there, further up Rollins. What was that road there? Yeah, it's further to the west. That main drag into Meadow Landing. There's a light there.
Ransom.
Yeah, I thought there was one on Kelly Road and Raymond Road as well.
Look, there may have been, I may have to take that one on notice. I know there was quite a number of intersections that we identified, and then obviously for reasons, main roads did not support some of those locations due to future works proposed. But yeah, I'll check that one out.
Cheers, mate. That's all I had, sorry.
Any other questions, councillor? All good. Thanks, Brad.
I'll stick around for the next one too.
You can sit down if you want, and then we'll call you back. Okay, item 5.1.3, Corporate Business Plan 2022 to 2026. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Burgoyne.
Thanks, Thanks, Mr. President. Item 4.5.3.7 quotes veranda at Coconut Hall. I'm just wondering if anything was done about the dust from the turnaround at the water tanks at Coconut. The amount of mess that was getting inside there, I thought that might have been a priority if that hasn't been done already.
Yeah, look, through the chair, when that was raised, I did refer it to our construction people, Barry Back and team, and I believe there has been some work done, but I'll need to follow that one up.
Yeah, if you could, because close to the work before last, nothing had been changed there.
Yeah, okay, I'll definitely follow that one up and let you know.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
Thank you.
Okay, we have item 5.1.4, Workforce Diversity Plan. A question from Councillor Veach.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Just referring to the estimates of employers' costs from now until 2025, and obviously there is an increase. And I'm just curious as to whether this is a combination of pay increases for staff and new staff, or is it just one of those elements? So new staff or pay increases?
Thank you, Councillor Beach, and through the Chair. Just a note initially that an addendum will be provided to actually reflect the forecasts. The figures currently contained in the workforce plan were calculated on base year actuals, not the estimated budget for 21-22, so they will be changed. But the budget figures that are included represent both the award and enterprise bargaining agreement increases, as well as step increases at appraisal time. And then there's also the progressive increases for additional positions as referenced on page 13, which are also provided in the budget and term financial plan.
So a combination of both.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Campbell.
Thanks, Mr. President. As this is the first time that we've actually seen this document, my question is, does the 22-23 budget adequately accommodate the shortfalls as in the ICT, salaries and wages to attract qualified staff, training and development and work safety and health as identified as issues within this report, and how will this be addressed?
Thank you, and through the Chair. The budget accommodates planning for the shortfalls in ICT with a feasibility study, strategic plan and the beginning of the implementation of the ERP highlighted as projects for this year, with additional ICT officers in future years. Salaries and wages to attract qualified staff are included in the budget, with wage estimates for new positions predicted at the top of each band level to allow for some flexibility in making offers. The Shire will also focus on a number of strategy developments in year one, which focus on the attraction and retention of employees at the Shire. With this, we need to also undertake an analysis of our remuneration and benefits. However, it has to be in conjunction with detailed service planning reviews and other performance areas to ensure we're creating, I guess, the best efficiency and rewarding performance. Increases in salaries generally won't alone improve attraction and retention of qualified staff, so things like employee wellness programs will form an integral part of that strategy. The training, there's also a question I think about the training budget for work health and safety, and so that was increased, and we've created a training matrix to make sure that that training is done in a structured way.
So I suppose if I can, follow-up question, the CEO is happy with the resources in the budget to address the issues that were raised in this plan?
As mentioned by the Manager of Governance and Strategy, we have a budget available to undertake the planning for ICT improvements. And as the first year in the budget, our focus is on asset management. So we do have a coordinator position in year 1, and then also the events officer as part of the Destination Harvey region. Of course, in regards to future positions, there are pressures on the organisation, but we're also cognisant that there is a need to balance the project work and infrastructure work for the community balanced with the need for staff, and so we've really looked across the plan to make sure that we've scheduled that in a sustainable manner. Thank you.
If I can maybe just flag, councillors, that we're looking at maybe doing a workshop before the council meeting next week to go through the 5.1.4, the Workforce and Diversity Plan, 5.4.1, the Long-Term Financial Plan, and 5.4.2, the Asset Management Plan. So everyone can be across all of that leading into the budget decision at next council meeting. So just be mindful that that'll pop up in your invite calendar, and hope everyone can make it to that. Councillor Burgoyne, did you have a question?
I had one in relation to training and development, the graph there, which concerned me a little bit, that it looks pretty good when you first glance at it, in regards to a bit over 40% are happy with that they don't have any barriers to training and development, which leaves almost 60% that do. So but from what I've heard, that's going to be covered and addressed, so that's why I lowered my hand, mate.
Okay, would you like to respond to that?
Through the chair, so I confirmed with our finance department today that every department has increased their training and professional development budgets sort of across the board, so there is extra flexibility there. We also didn't have a great take-up of our study leave organisational directives, so we're planning to communicate that a little bit further and see if we can get staff to take up the benefits that sort of already exist. So yeah, we're on to it.
Okay, any other further questions, councillors? Okay, item 5.1.5, lease renewal, Hope Christian College Incorporated. Any questions, councillors? Okay, item 5.1.6, Council Action Register, January 2022 to June 2022. Councillor Campbell.
Thanks, Mr. President. One question. First question is regarding item 22/008. When will council be receiving a briefing on the business case for Stanley Road?
I communicated with the CEO of Bunbury Harvey Regional Council today in regards to the progression of the business case. That business case will be represented to the next BHRC Council meeting on the 11th of August. And in addition to that, there will be a report going to that meeting to request that the 2 member local governments who have committed money towards the capping projects to provide that as a capital contribution and not as loan funding. So those 2 items are being considered by BHRC. In addition, the Shire of Harvey with the City of Bunbury are engaging an accounting firm to review the business case assumptions. So that work, we're waiting for a quote for that work so that both councils can be confident in regards to the assumptions on that business case. So looking at the timing of all of those items, I'd still say it's 2 to 3 months away before council will see a business case coming for consideration.
Councillor Campbell.
Thank you. And my second question was around item 22/026, which is the fuel station at Stanley Road. And I note that there's been a DAP approval on that, so I'm assuming that there were no objections received during the advertising. But under the delegation, can staff tell us what issues were raised with DAP surrounding this application, if there were any issues from our perspective? Because I know there were several concerns raised by councillors on planning grounds, such as the traffic management, the lighting of the intersection and the clearance of vegetation out of the Kemerton buffer.
Through Mr Chairman, my apologies, Councillor, I wasn't actually in attendance at the meeting, and I was under the impression you were having a look at more so in terms of the public submissions, which there was only that one objection through to it. As far as the other items we did discuss at the meeting, it was discussed at length in regard to the lighting of the intersection, and unfortunately that one wasn't actually a condition that was supported eventually by the JDAP. It was considered that the intersection probably may need to be lit by now, but what was being proposed actually doesn't trigger the requirement for lighting to occur. As far as the clearing is concerned, they've gone through the appropriate clearing approval process, and the vegetation in that area was considered acceptable to be removed. As far as impact on residential amenity, because of the fact that it is actually on the highway and quite separate from existing residents, the cumulative impact of that on the traffic on South Western Forestry Highway, and also the comings and goings from the regional tip and other uses on there, it was considered that it would have negligible impact on the amenity of residents in that area.
No, I think it was just raised that the lighting is a responsibility of main roads, so not of the proponent. I should remember, because I think I sat in there, Mr Hall.
Yes, you did.
Any other questions, councillors? Okay, infrastructure services. Item 5.2.1, Walga advocacy position on the management of bushfire brigades. Any questions? All happy? Okay, item 5.2.2, Sienna Grove and Tuscany Green bidding up London plane trees. Further report. Councillor Beach.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chair. And thank you, Mr Alexander, for your typed response. My question for the rest of the council is, given the diversity of the respondents' views, staff have quite rightly recommended further liaison with the residents of both streets. I was curious as to whether this would be done by correspondence or considering inviting them to what could loosely be called a workshop where all views can be expressed openly and a consensus reached.
Yes, yeah, through the chair, I think it will be a face-to-face discussion with residents. There was quite a diversity of views, and obviously the recommendation is that we do proceed with removal of a number of trees and then discuss suitable replacement species. But yeah, I think it would be prudent to meet the affected residents face to face and come up with a consensus so we can move forward with this.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Okay, item 5.2.3, breach number 4930, Collie River Road, further report. Any questions? Councillor Campbell.
Oh, just one thing, Mr President. Just confirming that the monetary contributions by the two shires, is that 50-50?
Look, through the chair, that still needs to be determined. And obviously, I know that Dartmouth was keen to contribute. The actual amount, I think we need to discuss that. Obviously, the ideal outcome is for the two shires and the landowner to contribute financially, even though the landowner is suggesting that his contribution will be in kind, which isn't really going to work in accordance with the safety regs and whatnot. So yeah, I suppose we need to, council makes a decision on this one, we need to meet Dartmouth, main roads and the landowner and thrash out a way forward. And the landowner needs to be aware that he's the main beneficiary of any work that's going to be undertaken on this bridge in the long term.
Councillor Burgoyne.
I'd say he's the only beneficiary out of that, but take it that this is a bridge that's already in use, or has been used, so second hand, what life expectancy are we looking at from this replacement bridge?
Okay, it's got a 100-year life, according to main roads. It's quite a solid structure, and these sort of bridges, you know, are normally used as a temporary bridge. However, the design is so robust that main roads have indicated they've got a 100-year life, and this one is basically quite new. Yeah, they're confident that this thing will last just as long as any other bridge that's constructed on that site.
So we won't have a problem anymore.
Not in our lifetime, Councillor Burgoyne.
Maybe,
just go on to mute, Rick. Councillor Dickinson.
I was just wanting to confirm that it had been secured.
Look, mate, I've sent an email to Main Roads advising that we're supporting it, Dartmouth is supporting it. Main Roads have indicated that they are pursuing bringing the bridge over. If this all falls over and we can't get agreement on funding and whatnot, then they will still have that bridge and possibly use it elsewhere. So it's you know, they'll be proceeding with this regardless. The only thing is, once agreement has been reached, there's the other aspect of the actual documentation, designing the abutments and all that Main Roads will undertake, so that the bridge can be located on this particular site, and that's where the cost is. So Main Roads are happy to wear the cost of purchasing the bridge, bringing it over, undertaking the design, preparing the tender documentation, and then obviously there'll be the actual cost of constructing the abutments and actually assembling the bridge on site.
Any further questions, councillors?
If I may.
Yes, you may, Councillor Burgoyne.
And just a sudden thought, looking at the pictures, that's obviously an old bridge. Is there a possibility we could use that somewhere in some sort of heritage precinct, or is it just going to be demolished, or we haven't got that far in the planning stage yet?
No, look, we haven't even looked at that, but obviously there's still some pretty good timber in that bridge, and that may be able to be utilised elsewhere, possibly not as a bridge, but possibly for other purposes. And also some of it we can feed to the white ants because some of it's in pretty poor condition.
Okay, any other further questions? Okay, moving on to sustainable development. Item 5.3.1, development application use not listed, lot 101, number 96, Binningup Road, Binningup. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Campbell?
Thank you. I'm just trying to work out how much they're going to word this, and I'm not sure whether staff will have an answer, but we've been told that the life of this, the use for this building is 10 to 15 years. So, and then it can be, the site can be reused for tourism or aged care or the like. If there's no interest in reusing this site for an alternate use, how long do we allow this facility to remain unused before they need to pull it apart and remove it off the site, I suppose? Well, how long are we prepared, I suppose, to leave the site not being utilised?
I don't think, sorry, through the chair, I don't think we'd want the site not to be used. I think what we would look at doing is actually, as part of not being the decision maker that JDAPs are, we would request that JDAP have a look at a condition that almost gives us a management strategy in terms of an exit strategy for the site. So if we know for a fact that a year out or 2 years out there's no appetite by the landowner to keep the infrastructure there, then by that time we know that the infrastructure is going to need to be removed. If there is an appetite for that facility to remain in a different form, then we would be triggering a point that we would need another development application and actually go through another approval process. So we would manage it through appropriate conditions and management plans. Councillor, there's one thing that the officer's report, and I apologise, there will be an addendum coming next week on page 47 of your report, and actually prior to that on page 46, the advertising period, the mandatory advertising period under the model scheme text. We've actually written 14 days. It was my oversight. I should have picked it up. It's 28 days. So that actually changes the table on page 47 from 18th of August to the 1st of September in terms of that sort of approximate time frame for when that particular part of the process will be completed. That doesn't alter the ability for this report to come to the September Council meeting. Mr. President, did you want any feedback in response to the deputation that was made? Don't need to.
Personally, or
no,
for councils? Councillor Beach?
That was going to be my question. Is it appropriate for Mr. Hall to give a response to some of the issues that were raised, in particular that there are other land parcels around that might be more suitable, and this use not listed on agricultural land, basically?
Very briefly, Council, because the workforce accommodation is actually a growing demand. It's definitely a shortage of accommodation. More so, this particular sort of workforce accommodation is more evident in the northwest. We've only recently experienced in the southwest over the last 12 to 18 months. So it's fair to say that, yeah, we don't have a planning framework that is geared the way that some of the other schemes up north are. So we need to deal with them as use not listed and on that case-by-case basis. And the position statement of the Department of Planning sort of, over 4 years ago now, actually does acknowledge that it's a case-by-case sort of proposal. It also made a very interesting comment in regard to the point that was raised this afternoon in terms of urban versus rural. So it said where practical it should be in an urban area or a town site area. Council, this particular site is actually one lot removed. It immediately joins the town site. So we're not actually looking at departing significantly from a position paper 4 years ago that was generally geared for the northwest. So I don't consider that the decision that Albemarle have made to choose this site is that far removed from the position statement from the Department of Planning over 4 years ago. Regardless of whether it's urban or rural, we need to apply the principles of proper and orderly planning. So how they landed on this site was a very extensive site selection process. If they had determined that an urban area was preferred, I would have assumed they'd use that, but it wasn't available. And this is the most practical solution to that site selection process, so we need to deal with that as the development application we've got. This isn't your typical workforce accommodation though. It is of a much higher standard, and it may have longer term alternative uses which Councillor Campbell's raised. If it wasn't an urban area, well, all the workers are actually in the urban areas now, fragmented everywhere. So the statement of enough is enough in terms of your typical workforce accommodation is evident in our areas down here, in our urban areas, which enough's enough. Our businesses want their rooms back for short stay accommodation. So that comment of enough as enough goes both ways in terms of, you know, not providing remote, rural-based workers' accommodation of low standard. This has addressed all those issues that the accommodation facilities are dealing with up north. So it's been quite a conscious decision to actually choose this type of accommodation and this location. We, however, need to deal with it on a planning basis. It is immediately adjoining town centre. It has access to all the requisite urban services, but power, sewer, water. So from a planning framework point of view, you're not that far removed from everything the state government is actually asking local government to consider on a case-by-case basis. And as far as sterilising sort of rural land, this is less than 20% of the property itself, and intensive and extensive horticulture still can continue on this site. So our professional opinion as officers are that it's not that far removed from where we should be. We're responding to an application we've received that, in the opinion of the applicant, is their preferred site for their site selection and their workforce requirements. So all we're asking councillors to see if whether or not you guys agree with that position, go through the approval through the advertising process, and then we can bring a more informed report back to yourselves so that we can inform the JAT as to the local government's position. But that was really sort of just a summary in terms of that appropriateness of urban-rural and why this particular site as to others.
Councillor Burgoyne.
I've got a couple if that's okay. The first one I've got is it's being built on multiple-purpose wetland area. In the past, I always believed that was a no-no, and I'm just wondering what's changed that we may allow that. First off.
Through Mr. Chairman, if you pull up the multiple use wetland layer on any environmental framework, 90% of the Swan Coastal Plain is multiple use wetland, and it can be used for a whole range of different uses. It's when you become a conservation category wetland, that's when the more stringent requirements in terms of buffering and appropriate land uses kick in. But multiple use can be used for a whole range of uses.
And that's the same for the wetland that they're encroaching onto to the west?
To the west, which is the conservation category wetland, that's correct, yes. So it needs to be buffered from there, yeah.
Okay, it appears to me that they were building on that section as well.
Oh, through the creek line?
Yes.
Yes, that is still multiple use wetland.
Okay. Secondly, in there it keeps stating that the traffic will flow from Taranto Road, but there is a feeder road from Biddingup Drive, and we know how people are because we're people. So what makes them think that having that feeder road is going to stop people going in and out of that road?
Through Mr. Chairman, when you were referring to people going in and out through that road, are you referring to the workers that are residing in the camp? Because they would be under the strict control of their employee as to where they could or can't go. There is an acknowledgement in the report that says there will be some use of that access way off Biddingup Road for daily servicing and also for members of the Biddingup community should they wish to access it. And yeah, those things are actually still yet to be worked through, but as far as the principal access for the workers, it will be in and out through Taranto Road. I think the report also made reference that after the hours of 6 AM and 6 PM, which are the core shifts, workers do have the option of leaving the site for their own personal recreation activities, and I think that access way may be available to them. I don't know at this stage, I need to clarify that, but it would not be on an extensive basis.
Okay. The last one I had may have already been answered by you, but I'm not sure if I heard correctly. You're saying that the workforce is already here and shuttered it out. Is this being built to bring the current workforce together, or to bring in more workforce from elsewhere?
Through Mr Chair, I'm not really in a position to comment as to whether it's an existing workforce that's being retained or if it's a whole new workforce that's coming in. All I can say is that the expansion of trains 3 and 4 trigger a much larger workforce, and therefore there is the need for this additional accommodation.
Because that would obviously leads on to the fact that they have always given an assurance that there would be local workforce use, and if you use the local workforce, they're eliminated. So, anyway, that's the last of my questions. Thank you.
Councillor Beach.
Yeah, Mr Hall, the irregular shape of the subject site, that would be then to do with the wetlands, would it, to avoid certain areas?
Through Mr Chair, so the irregular shape of the footprint of the development?
Of the footprint of the development. On the plans here, it's sort of very irregular.
Yeah, look, it's responding to the physical topography, and it's also responding to where the native vegetation is. So you notice that they're actually trying to avoid clearing any of the native veg. So yes, it's the irregularity is actually responding to the site attributes.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this may not have anything to do with the development application per se. However, have staff and Albemarle been in any discussions around how Albemarle will contribute to the community, and have Albemarle considered establishing some sort of community funding that the community can have access to?
Through the chair, I can answer that one. I have been in contact with Albemarle, and a meeting has been organised for early August to consider a community benefit partnership. So we'll progress those discussions, and I can provide a further update to council after that meeting.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other further questions, councillor? Okay. Item 5.3.2, final adoption of reviewed local planning policies. Councillor Campbell.
Thanks, Mr. President. These questions, simple ones, just around the home occupation local planning law. So my first question is, can staff just refresh me on what clause 61 relates to?
Through Mr Chair, look, clause 61 is actually contained within the Dean provisions, which is a statewide sort of document that all local governments need to adhere to, and it makes reference specifically to works and uses that are exempt from approval. So a home occupation isn't a use that's actually exempt.
In paragraph B 4.9, it refers to the wording of timely period to investigate complaints. Can we put in a more definite time frame? Because how long is a timely period for us to investigate? It could be 3 weeks, 6 weeks. I mean, what is acceptable? So can we put in a, I don't know, something like 10 working days or something, or is that unachievable?
Through Mr Chair, look, it depends on the nature of the complaint. So if we've limited a particular activity to 7 AM to 5 PM, and someone is receiving, say for a hairdresser, for example, and they're regularly getting clients at 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, we'd ring them up and say, look, you're not compliant. And it can be dealt with as quickly as that. It might be that, sorry for hairdressers, you're only allowed to have the one person, let's say they've employed someone else. So that might be a little bit of a more complex process to unpick. So, you know, it would be complaint specific. I'd be reluctant to put anything in place that said you need to deal with it in 10 days, because I said we could deal with it in 1 hour, and there are others that may actually be a very lengthy time frame. For example, if there is at the moment they're exempt under COVID, but if it was a home occupation that actually didn't have an approval, that would be a lengthy process, because they may, one, be able to be approved, or two, they may not be able to approve. They may not be able to approve and they close and go home nicely, or they dig their heels in. So that complaint process is actually quite drawn out. So
I suppose what I'm getting at is, you know, what the community expectation is of if they lodge a complaint, how long is it going to take us to investigate it and resolve it, or at least advise them what the outcome is. So, but I understand. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. And my final question is regard to the definitions. In subpara E and I, could they just be explained to me?
yeah, so subparagraph E in definitions relates to retail sales. So you're not actually allowed to undertake retail sales from the property, i.e. say have a shop front or a display area. If I'm making cakes, then I need to deal with you online. You can't come and have a look at a display case and choose that one, that one, that one. As far as item I is concerned in terms of an essential service, so if you are undertaking an activity that, for example, but you've got single phase power throughout the residential estate, and you're wanting to do an activity that requires the need for upgrade to say 3-phase power, is that more akin to more of an industrial or commercial activity, or do you need an upgrading to the roads, or do you actually need more on-site parking or something? So scale and intent of the impact that yours actually has on the existing services, and they shouldn't go beyond that of a residential standard. And I think you missed one of your questions.
I did. What was that one?
Number 2.
Thank you. Could staff provide example of where the MPS will make that determination? That's in para 4.2.
So 4.2 relates to the manager of planning services having delegation to actually determine the extent of advertising. So as to who actually gets the referral from it. So if you have an accountant that works from home, doesn't really see any clients most of the time, online, probably wouldn't need to refer it out to neighbours. Or if you have someone down at the end of a cul-de-sac that will actually draw people past the whole street, you wouldn't just limit yourself to just those people. You would look at it for the whole street, because you have to be drawn past it. So that provides discretion of, God forbid, common sense as to what we think is going to be the likely impact based on the application we've got.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, just got a couple of questions for me.
Yep, Councillor Christian. Yep.
Thank you. In the section under definitions of home occupational, section G, it says the use calling of a vehicle of more than 4.5 tonnes care weight, whereas in April's meeting it was above 2 tonnes. What was the reasoning to the change of that?
I wouldn't mind taking that on notice, but I think it's actually model scheme text definition for what's a commercial vehicle. There's a difference between our local laws, model scheme text, and our scheme in terms of what the tear weight for a commercial vehicle was. But I'll get back to that one.
Just one more. I just read it just a second ago. It was in regards to the advertisement. I noticed on there was the banner section which has a stipulation that it's prohibited unless it's under 1 metre tall by 2 metres wide. I just noticed quite a few banners in the industrial area. So ones which are on the fencing on this, it states that it's prohibited, so they can't have that on there. Is that correct?
So, Councillor, were you just checking as to whether or not you're referring to home occupation signage
Sorry.
or banners in general?
Or banners in general, sorry.
Okay, so banners in general?
Yeah, in under advertisement 4.1.15.
In your home occupation areas, you're limited to 0.2 square metres. As far as your banner signs, we would consider 4.12. I would need to check that for you, Councillor, but I think you're actually referring no longer to the home occupation program. So I'll clarify that one with you and get back to you on that.
Awesome, thanks. That's all.
That's right.
Any other questions, councillors? Okay, corporate services. So item 5.4.1, long-term financial plan 2022 to 2032. Councillor Beach.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Pres. I noticed that the employee costs shown in the table, statement 1, forecast statements of the financial plan, didn't align with the estimates of the employee costs in the workforce diversity plan. of the attachments, and I've had a verbal response from Mr. Winter, but perhaps we could explain to the councillors or whoever. Oh,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. I think manager governance and strategy, when we are discussing the workforce plan, discussed that one, that the budget which was inputted in the workforce plan was on the basis of budget calculations and not on the actual basis. There will be an amendment coming in the workforce plan which will revise the revise the budget for the workforce plan, and that will be in line with what mentioned in the long-term financial plan as well as in the budget.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Okay, for item 5.4.2, Asset Management Plan 2022 to 2032. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Dickinson.
Just kind of a very broad question. Is the communication getting out to community groups to work with the Shire in regards to their needs so that their wishes can be accommodated more easily into our forward planning? Because, you know, we've had a few things sprung on us of late, and it's kind of difficult when we're adopting these plans to have to accommodate them as well.
Thank you, Councillor, and through the Chair, just quickly before I pass back over to Mr Winter, the Community Grants Review did pick up that challenge through the infrastructure stream, and we at the last council did adopt that and also endorsed a review of that to re-look at it again. So we do identify that that is an issue as well.
Mr Winter, I'll put you on the spot.
Thank you, Mr President. Communication is obviously an issue that we currently and probably always will have with the public, but understanding that it is an issue, and you know, we have our community meetings now, and excuse me, are trying to factor works into the long-term financial plan. You know, I guess we can only try.
Can I, through the Chair, just make a comment? Part of the Workforce and Diversity Plan was the employment of a coordinator of asset management, and we have looked at our infrastructure team, and the manager design and development position has been re-scoped to include asset management as well. So I would imagine with that team there will be an increased focus on asset management. Also in the budget this year we have funding for facility audits as well, so that we can look at our community buildings and identify maintenance schedules, which will also feed into these asset management plans as well. So that caters for maintenance work and upgrade, but obviously new, and that engagement with the community is also ongoing, as has been mentioned. But yeah, I think we'll definitely be improving our processes in that regard in the future.
Any other questions, councillors? Okay, item 5.4.3, annual budget 2022-2023. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Mr President. Not actually to do with the budget, but I was wondering if staff have actually had the opportunity to have a look at on our media platforms how to, for the community, on how to read a rate notice, for example, some FAQs perhaps on how rates come to fruition and the like, because I have had a look at a couple of other local governments and they do it quite well. So I don't know whether we've got enough time to do that this year, but I'm just wondering if it's been looked at or considered.
might take that on. Thank you, Mr. President. That is something that we've already progressed and looked at what other councils are doing and trying to improve our level of communication, and especially in the social media and on the web page. So that is something that you will see this year.
Good.
It's booked in for Thursday.
You are. Oh, are you?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Would that, sorry Mr. President, just follow up, would that information also accompany the rate notices?
It will have a link to a web page that has that information on, and also built into that is a new platform that we have where the ratepayers will be able to go online and see their rate notice, make payments online, and also have a history of their rate notices all within that portal. So trying to improve that presence.
That's good.
Okay, any other further questions? Just before we depart from corporate services, well done to the team. Yeah, it's been a big couple of months, so well done.
Thank you.
You'll be able to rest easy after next Tuesday, Sunil.
Sleep at night.
Okay, community and lifestyle. Item 5.5.1, Grow, Cook, Eat, Create, request for fee waiver. Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I acknowledge that we've been accommodating Grow, Cook, Eat, Create for about 5 years now. So on that basis, I just have a couple of questions. On their Facebook page, they indicate they're operating actually 5 days per week. So I just wanted to confirm that their normal higher rates are being applied for the 2 additional days. And following on from that, for them operating 5 days a week, is that a significant impact on LLC?
Thank you, Councillor, and through the Chair, that is correct. They are charged normal hire fees per the Council endorsed fees and charges for the additional 2 days. I do have the manager of the LLC here who may be able to answer off the cuff. However, we do have a booking system that does identify all additional users that wish to book that, and Richard may be able to provide some information to that.
We're on, aren't we? There we go. Thanks, Mr. President. No, just do that. Yeah, so look, as far as the usage outside of those additional 5 days, sorry, whenever we receive bookings, the agreement we've got with Grow, Cook, Eat is that they need to vacate or allow for other bookings that we've got. So we've got a number of long-term bookings that come up annually. We also have obviously the vacation period, the vacation care. So that they've been able to always be in agreement with our there. So there are occasionally obviously some minor, large-scale ones that we obviously defer because we don't want to interfere with their regularity of their booking. But other than that, most occasions we've been able to accommodate.
Councillor Lovett.
Thank you. When on the days that they don't go there, so school holidays and when you have other bookings, do they not operate or do they go somewhere else?
No, they do find other premises. So this most recent school holidays, they were over at the Eton Boomers, using their clubhouse. Prior to that, so they've got a couple of locations sort of on standby that they either get quite cheap rental for the period that they need, or just another location. So currently, as I said, I just spoke to them today and they were at the Eton Boomers clubhouse, for example.
Councillor Beach.
Yeah, I note that they're sending in 6 monthly financial statements. I've never seen one, but that's probably an operational matter anyway. Do they list in their income and expenditure and in and out for the cost of the hire and the donation that is received by council by waiving the fees?
I don't believe in their figures that they do. Obviously, we look at when we're reporting what that cost would be over the course of a 12-month period. So the figures that we put together for that do incorporate that, but I don't think they do that in their own profit and loss.
Yeah, because it would be an acknowledgement of the support that the council is giving them. If they had an income, just let's say those figures there, right, 31,800 is in and an expense of 31,800 out.
Yeah.
So has a negative impact on the budget, but it gives an acknowledgement of what is being provided.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, Councillor Beach grabbed one of my questions, so thank you for that. But my last one is, I noticed that they've changed their service to all abilities. And therefore there's an increase in their participation numbers, and the report indicated that the group is outgrowing the facility. So are they actively searching for other facility options, and is Morrissey an option that can be looked at as a fit for purpose?
Yep. So look, there were a number of locations that they had looked at. The men's shed had been one that we examined previously. They'd also approached Morrissey. Morrissey responded, basically they weren't interested on that one. So they are still looking at actively for, but the only thing was, I think from the men's shed one, they probably hinged a bit confidence on that one being successful, so they held off any other investigations that they probably had at this stage. So I believe they'll still be looking for premises around, and they've got a plan of what they would like their future plan to be. So that would include the interior layout, so where you would put things like the kitchen, so that central bench, so that everybody can access it when they're doing their preparation for food prep. What they would need as far as seating, obviously toileting, storage. So there's all those things that they would take from the room that they're currently doing, have a plan that they know would work, and then subject obviously to finance and availability, whether they construct that or whether they can find an existing building that already meets that requirement.
So I assume, sorry, Mr. President, thank you. So I assume someone's seen their financials report. So are they quite financial? Do we know?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor. The financial statements do maintain a positive net gross balance. Whether that would sustain them financially in an independent facility would need to be investigated.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dickinson.
Because of their current financial position, are they able to afford to pay rent for more of the days where they don't actually pay rent? So we actually reduce our subsidy to them. Because I do recall when this first came to council, and I think we were thinking that we were giving them the opportunity to get on their feet. Well, they seem to be on their feet now, so do we keep supporting them in this manner, and for what length of time?
And through the chair, perhaps we can provide the P&Ls to council so that you can make an informed decision for next week if you like.
Thank you.
If I can add that the CEO and myself have a general catch-up with Jodie Hands. So she's a supporter of the group and is looking at maybe sourcing some funding for a premises or an upgrade of one of our existing buildings. So that's sort of in the early stages, but that is something that's being looked at. So it reduces the pressure on LLC per se, so Richard can make more money. That's in his KPIs. So we are in a preliminary discussions with Jodie, so which is good. She's a big supporter of it. So yeah, we'll keep you informed on that. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Item 5.5.2, Community Sporting and Recreational Facility Fund, Harvey Bulls Football Club. Any questions, councillors? Okay, item 5.5.3, Coastal Community Funds. Councillor Beach.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Ms Davis, for the response to my questions. I've got 5 short questions. I'll rip through them. Basically, on the application before us. So I was curious as how the cost of the construction of the skate park was arrived at, as there was no supporting documentation. Do you want me to read them all off? Answer one by one.
Oh no, you two can just run it one by one over there. I'll let you two just take the lead.
Thank you, Chair and Councillor. The cost of the construction of the skate park of $100,000 in the coastal grant is for consultation and concept planning. It is anticipated any surplus funds will contribute to construction. The application was prepared between community groups in collaboration with the Shire, and it's modelled on a project plan and financial plan that was provided by the Shire of Capel for a similar project in Dallialop. There are some national facility specifications that are available to us that provide associated costs for construction, level of facility, size, etc., etc. And by example, a local level facility would be between 250 and 750 square kilometres. And square metres. The whole lot getting up. And that would be an estimated cost between 300 and 700,000. We also have the district level specifications as well.
Good, thank you. And they've listed that they're putting in money for in-kind contributions. Again, there was no evidence of how that was arrived at, but on what is the in-kind contribution likely to include? I know that wasn't part of the original question.
Definitely. The in-kind contribution is based on 150 volunteer hours. The model for that is $25 per hour, and it's anticipated that that will be through consultation and the forming of a committee.
Staff have recommended $350,000 be listed in the forward capital works, but the submission was requesting $400,000. How will that shortfall be made up?
Thank you, Councillor. The total project cost would need to be determined based on the concept plan, finalising the concept plan. So the 350 and the 400,000 we can say would be the best guess based on the evidence provided. The application does note that Lottery West is a potential funding provider, and officers are also aware that there are other funding available that would support a project like this.
Thank you. And in previous developments of this nature, communities have been asked for cash contributions. There's many examples of that around the Shire, but the most recent probably for skate parks anyway was the Oswin skate park, and the community raised $50,000. Is that part of this submission or the funding model?
Thank you for your question. Whilst it's not included in the application, the community have indicated very strong support for this project to go ahead. So officers will continue to explore that opportunity with the community for inclusion in the funding model as the project evolves.
Thank you. And finally, the project completion date is December 2023, and I was wondering whether that's achievable.
Thank you for this question. The consultation and concept planning will definitely be able to be completed within the grant funding timelines of before December 23. It would need to be done in time to allow the Shire to meet its diligence for design and construct. And the design and construct timelines are determined by the forward capital works plan. So should the project be endorsed through council, officers will work closely with the community to meet those timeframes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, you two. Any other questions? Councillor Dickinson.
Yeah, I just was a bit confused to start with that it was being put forward by the community, Bedding Up Community Garden group, and so I was just wondering whether it's correct under the Constitution to be able to do that.
Thank you, Councillor. Through the Chair, the community grants applications need to be from an incorporated body, and the Bedding Up Community Group have been quite active with that community in Bedding Up more broadly. Further to that, they're also in the proximity of the skate park and have been strong advocates for it. So they did meet all of the criteria for auspicing this grant application. It did originally arise through the youth collective, so the Shire's new youth group of young people in the community who have been very keenly advocating for all of our skate park infrastructure to be upgraded.
Any other questions, councillors, on 5.5.3? Okay. Item 6, notice of motion for following meeting. Councillor Campbell requested that the following notice of motion be placed in the ordinary council meeting agenda for 26 July 2022, that the community grant funding guidelines are reviewed with consideration given as to whether they remain as guidelines or a policy is developed or both. The council is provided the opportunity to workshop them with all information provided for consideration. The reason given that I feel the process needs to be tightened, particularly around the ability for the community groups to meet some of the requirements, and that council is provided the opportunity to discuss all community grant funding applications. And that is on the screen for everyone. All happy? Okay, item 7, matters behind closed doors. Are there any questions pertaining to infrastructure services 7.1.1, tender T052022, or 7.12, tender T072022? 7.2.1, tender T062022. All good? Okay. Okay, we're up to item 8. Any questions on item 8? Okay. Thanks for attending the meeting, Mr. Jones. Great to have you here. So we'll officially close the meeting at 5:38, and thank everyone for their attendance. And before I do sign off, Ben, welcome. You thought you were going to sneak away and get away with it, but welcome to the Shire of Harvey, and certainly hope you enjoy your stay here.